Well, a belated happy Valentine's Day to our viewers. And as you can see, we've got a special episode of the Smoke-Filled Room this week. We had a really cool idea, it being Valentine's week, to have couples, political couples, on to talk this week about the issues of the week. So we've got some really special guests. This is going to be a fun episode. Let me do some introductions. We've got Leslie Munger. She's the former state comptroller, also the deputy governor, and you had a pretty dang successful career in business, even outside of politics. Leslie, thanks so much for being with us this week.
Thanks, Colin. Happy to be here.
We also have her spouse, John Munger. It's kind of like those T-shirts from the Super Bowl that were going around. It was like Taylor Swift's boyfriend just won the Super Bowl. We've got John, who's Leslie's spouse, but he's a big deal in his own right, a partner at Jansen, Munger, McKinley, and Kirby. He also has served in political positions as the Vernon Township Republican chairman, was a committee member for the Lake County Federation. John, you've had a lot of titles, and we're really glad to have you this week.
Glad to be here, Colin.
How was your Valentine's Day? Did you guys have a good Valentine's Day?
We did. We kind of stayed in and cooked an extra yummy dinner and just enjoyed just the two of us. It's quite nice.
Nice.
Yeah,
Who cooked it?
Leslie's a great cook, so we had.
I like it. I like it. All right. We also have Aaron Del Mar. He is the Republican State Central Committee member, Palatine Township Republican committeeman, the highway commissioner, and more importantly is known as Sarah's lesser half. Aaron, what's going on, man?
Oh,
wow.
And also someone who struggles to use technology. So here we go.
sorry about that, Colin. Yeah, I'm good. Glad to be here, man. I'm very honored to be had on after the last smoke-filled room that you had me through. So just happy to be here, brother.
Well, let's be real. The whole reason you're here is because it's the only way we can get Sara on. So we've also got Sara Cox. She's an independent graphic designer. Also, she somehow keeps up with the crazy household that the Del Mars have and that she has over there. How many kids is it now that you guys have that you have to deal with, Sara?
How many?
It's 6 if she doesn't include me. If it's 7 if you include me.
So, Sara, we're really glad to have you. Thanks for being here this week.
Thank you very much.
I got to ask you, did you guys have a good Valentine's? Was Aaron at least semi-decent to you?
He's always semi-decent to me. Isn't that impressive? Yes, we had a lovely dinner with all the kids that were here. So
okay. As they get older, they kind of spread out a bit, right?
They do, yes.
All right, and last with me, certainly not least, is Abbey Corbett. She's the events extraordinaire at Cor Strategies. She also handles booking our guests for these smoke-filled room shows. So if you don't like our guests, it's her fault. If you want to be on the show, you got to make Abbey happy. So send her gifts, buy her cookies. That's how you get on this show. Abbey, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yes.
I mean, John and Leslie are obviously like amazing and some of our favorites. So we had to try to get you guys on. And Aaron, you know, great guest, of course. And Sara, I just needed some backup because I know we align more. So I'm super excited that you're here.
So I think
to Abbey's point, we actually do with our sort of spouse guests. There's going to be a fun balance here because John, I don't want to speak for you, but I know you tend to be more right of center. Abbey's more in the center. Sara, again, don't want to speak for you, but I know you do lean left of center. And so for our 3 spouse guests, we actually are going to have a pretty cool balance in addition to Leslie, Aaron, and I being overtly political. So I think we have some pretty good perspective this week. So let's get right into it. So we've got 3 questions we want to ask you guys. Just because I think for a lot of people, this is unique and you guys can give some really cool insights into what it's like to be couples in politics. So we're going to go through a couple questions here that I want to ask you guys, and then we'll get into some of our political topics. The first one is just as we enter this crazy political season, how do you guys handle this? How do you, and I'll start with you guys, Aaron and Sara, on this one. How do you manage the craziness of this with just being pulled 1,000 different directions? What's advice you might give to other people dealing with sort of the stresses of political season?
I think, cutting it out first is that we try to discuss only the topics that we agree on. When it comes to politics, there's not very many.
So you just don't talk politics then?
We don't
talk about it.
I try to poke sometimes and I'll be like, hey, did you see that they called Joe Biden a very well-mannered old man that has a very poor memory? And then Sara will come back, well, that was by a Republican. former Trump official. Aaron, you can't believe that. I'm like, that happens a lot. And then I'll ask Sarah, I'm like, hey, did you see that in your feed? And she's like, well, did you see what the Democrats had to say? Because that's what popped in my feed.
That's actually something interesting. And this is a tiny bit off topic, but that our feeds are so different. It's just crazy. I mean, and so it's sort of like, it's good for us to cross reference sometimes. Whether or not he buys into any of it is a different, story. But fortunately, we have so many things to discuss in our lives that we can generally avoid really contentious conversations.
But the only problem is every time I put a Trump sign in the front yard, it magically disappears within 30 seconds. You know what I mean? That's why I got to keep about a dozen of them in there and just keep on rotating and then digging them out of the garbage, but that's okay. We have a rule now at our house that only time we have political signs if it has our name on it. So
there you go.
And it gets upset. How come I drove by your house and I didn't see my sign? I'm like,
you can blame me. That's fine.
we got to get Sarah out there running. We can get a sign for her up in the yard. Leslie and John, how about you guys? How do you guys deal with you guys are really, really busy in your own right, let alone in politics. How do you deal with that?
Wow. So it's so funny to hear Aaron and Sarah talk about that. Luckily, Leslie and I are all lined up on the political viewpoint. So we have the same set of signs out front of the house every single election cycle. And I think that helps a lot because, we've been doing this a long time before Leslie, had the good fortune to be the state comptroller. And we were committeemen, for many years, active with our local township Republican organization. And, we kind of see things the same way. And so luckily we had buy-in as a family when, Leslie ran for state representative in the 2014 election cycle. And then when she became state comptroller in 2015. And so that helped to make the craziness a little bit easier. So we were able to buy in as a family and support each other to try to help her be successful.
I think it also helped a lot that our kids are older. They're 31 and 33 now. At the time when I was first running for office, they were in college and out of the house, and now they're really out of the house. And so, we don't have to worry about the things that, you have, Aaron, and that you all have to worry about and that you will be worrying about at some point.
Yeah, but even the boys helped out too. They were in parades, they were, passing out literature and everything. So we had buy-in even from the boys.
They helped us.
Which was super helpful.
Well, that's huge. I mean, for political families, if you don't have the whole family in, we talk to a lot of candidates all the time who have felt if you don't have your spouse or your kids that are in this with you, it can really drag you down and make it not enjoyable. And sometimes, ask Mitch Daniels, who isn't president, because his family wasn't on board with his political ambitions. You can see this where you don't have the family on board. So I think that's great advice from you guys.
I think one of the other funny things is when, just again, hearing some of the differences, when we're talking about what's going on in politics, we've read all the same stuff and our kids are actually texting us all the same stuff. So we're in like a bubble, where you're getting all the outside stuff. We keep hearing and like just feeding on each other, I think. So I guess in some ways we don't have to worry about disagreeing at the dinner table. So
Fair. Well, let me stick with you guys. And John, I want to ask you, and then we'll go to you, Sarah, specifically just for you two, this next question. What's it like being the spouse of a candidate who's running for office? Because too many times it sort of takes over your life in many ways. So for those people who watch, who maybe are running, or maybe they have a spouse who is running, what's some advice on how to handle it, whether you're the candidate or the spouse? What are things they should be thinking about that either make it tough on you or that, are a struggle for you?
Well, Collin, you use the word crazy, and that's how it is. So when you're running a campaign, and like we said during the earlier question, you have to have buy-in from the entire family, and especially I think from the spouse, because it is a team effort if you really want to be successful, because you've got to give it 110% in order to win your election and then do well in your job once you get in. And luckily, like I said before, Leslie and I were doing this a long time before she became a candidate. When she ran for state representative, I was one of the vice chairs of the Lake County Central Committee. So we were already organizing all throughout Lake County, and I was helping in that regard. And then when she ran for state representative and did such a great job, we were hoping that she would be successful there, and came up just a little bit short. But at any rate, I was already into the political scene when Leslie rose to the comptroller position. So I knew what was engaged, what was involved, and I was in a position to help her out using my past experience. But you definitely have to have, you know, buy-in, because it takes over your life. Politics is like being a rock star for people who aren't rock stars. And all of a sudden everybody wants to be your friend, and takes up all your free time, and you have to serve your constituents. And so having a helpful spouse, I think, is a great way to be a success.
I would like to say what a huge help John was when I was running as, you know, for both offices, but particularly for comptroller, because he went a lot of places with me, and would help get information from people that needed responses, or would talk to people who I didn't have time to talk to, and was really, you know, a surrogate for me in so many respects. And so I don't know how we would have done it if we weren't kind of working together on it. It would have been impossible.
Right. Like
I've seen John work a room like a champ.
Yeah.
So
We asked one to leave an event. I'll be like,
Yes.
okay, the cleaning crew is here. It's time for us to go.
Yeah. Well, it helps
Yeah.
it helps if the bar stays open.
Well, our best memory, I got to be honest, of you two is you two shutting down the dance floor at our wedding.
Yeah.
We will never forget how cool you two are, that you were the last ones off the floor. So, Sarah, what about you? You've had to go through this on numerous occasions, because Aaron likes to run for pretty much every office under the sun. So you've had to deal with this a lot.
Yes, I have. And I would say that our experience is clearly a little bit different than that, because we do not have, well, we do have some adult children now. I mean, technically, but we still have young children. And so particularly, I would say the most challenging one was when you were running for lieutenant governor, because I was a single parent basically for months on end. And my role was sort of to take care of everything here and still be in charge of driving people places and taking care of children in the house and animals and all of those kinds of things, so he could have the freedom to go everywhere that he needed to go, which was all over the state. Which was super time consuming. And I am not the person that will go and work the room. I do not like any attention. I do not like to have any spotlight on me. And I think he also is sometimes afraid to take me to places that he's trying to promote his Republican, views, because he's afraid I'll start telling people how I feel about it. And he thinks that might be a detriment to his cause.
Fair. And as he's giving a speech and you're out in the crowd going, boo.
Well, I think part of that, though, is that going back to that Bette Midler song, right? Sarah certainly is the wind beneath my wings, because I wouldn't be able to do all of the fun stuff and all the campaigning that I enjoy and meeting all the new people without making sure that everything was taken care of back at home. And, there's been a couple of times that, it's been a little challenging, but I think overall it's great. When Trump won in 2016, as you know, I was a delegate, and we got to go to the inauguration, and I'm like, hey, let's go to the inauguration. We're going to get tuxedos. You're going to get a ball gown. We're going to meet the president. And she said, she's not
Absolutely not.
She wasn't going to go to anything Trump. And I'm like, honey, we got to go regardless who the president is. We don't get to go to many, presidential inaugural balls. And she's like, well, maybe I can go and I'll do the march the next day. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and bring my best friend, Jean, right? I think we might engage in that a little bit more. I don't want to see my partner on, CNN the next day during the women's march. But, when I did run for lieutenant governor, I was very particular about, specific events that I thought were most important, right? We pick and choose. So when we did our big rally, we were, Sara certainly was there. She brought all the kids. When we did, some of the other more important ones, she was there. But, I'm never embarrassed. She has her own mind. She has her own opinion. She has her own, she can vote. I mean, our house is certainly a split ballot, right? Sometimes it gets a little frustrating. I got a little angry on some of the candidates that she chose, but I respect her decision. I respect her.
But I always vote for Aaron.
Right.
There you go. That's all that
Right,
matters.
All right, well, let's go to our last topic on this before we jump into the full agenda. And actually, I'll start with Abby, since she hasn't had a chance to talk, and I know she's so sad about that. How do you handle having different opinions on controversial issues specifically? Because you can say, hey, we won't talk about it, but you come home and you're just ramped up because you're on Facebook venting for 4 hours about that issue you really care about, and you're hopped up, and you come home and you might disagree with your spouse in that issue. How do you handle that? And I guess I'll just start with you, and you can maybe out me in front of our whole audience.
I mean, thankfully, you and I really don't like fully disagree on really anything. Like we disagree in like certain aspects of topics, but we always tend to like meet in the middle. So it's not, I never feel like there's a topic where I'm too afraid to bring it up or that it's going to lead to a fight, because we really do tend to mesh well in terms of how we feel about things. I mean, the last thing we kind of went head to head on was actually the last item on our agenda. So that was fun.
We'll save that maybe for the end of the agenda. Sure. Stay tuned to the end of the episode for a fight between Collin and his wife. But I think what we do really well is, and we do this in all of life, not just politics, is understand that each person comes from their own perspective. And I really get excited when I talk to Abby, or anyone, frankly, but especially my wife, and she has a different perspective, because that's the moment I go, cool, you have a unique viewpoint, on things like guns, where we may sometimes align and sometimes not align. Abby grew up in the south side of Chicago. She could have a much different perspective than the waspy suburban, Irish Catholic that I grew up as. And so being able to hear why she arrives at her opinions, to me, that's not only interesting, it's also, I think, super valuable, because I can learn from that and I take that to the next conversation. So I think it's one thing we do super well is, we really want to hear each other's perspective, even if we vehemently disagree with their conclusions. So that's how we handle it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Wow.
I see John and Leslie looking at each other.
well, as I said earlier, we don't have that problem at our house, because we are like lined up. And as Leslie was saying, even our boys are all lined up too.
Nice.
So when we get the whole,
you might get letters after this asking for advice from people who want to pull that same thing off.
Yeah,
I don't know. We definitely can't say that over here. It becomes a little bit, hostile. There has been some hostile conversations.
I mean, very rarely would I call it hostile.
Maybe, certainly uncooperative, maybe.
Maybe.
Is that why Aaron had to grow the beard, just to cover up the bruises?
No, I mean, we have very stark contrasts on positions. I mean,
certain things are challenging for us to discuss, for sure.
Right. But I would say, kind of with a note what you said, Collin, is that I do like to listen to Sara's perspective. Not that I agree with it, but more of, all right, so if I'm in election season,
he's got to form an argument.
I got to be able to form an argument, right? So if I can practice convincing Sara on my position, maybe I can win independent softies and some moderates. I'm like, especially on Trump issues, on issues with, Second Amendment issues, certainly abortion, Sara takes a very contrastive position than I do. And I'm like, well, how if I presented it in this manner? Or if I talked about it in this manner, could I maybe convince you to at least think about voting for our side or for voting for me? So she is a really good sounding board to try to get an alternative position. And she gives me great examples of what she's going to fire back with, because she's very intelligent. She comes up with some great ideas. But yeah, I mean, I would say only one real big fight that comes to mind on issues, during the Trump administration, during immigration debate, it got pretty bad. I ended up sleeping at the office. True.
It's a true story.
Yeah, that's the only time that I've not stayed at home. I was like, I just had enough. Or during the presidential races, she had strong feelings for Elizabeth Warren, which I just couldn't wrap my head around. I really tried hard.
Listen, we do need our first Indian president, so I understand why she supported Elizabeth Warren.
Really? Well, that was at Tap House when we were arguing about Elizabeth Warren.
Okay.
Whatever. We're not going to get into that. See, that's what we do.
So even disagreeing there. Leslie, what do you think?
Well, as John said, we agree on a lot of things. I think maybe if we disagree on some things, it's kind of how we go about a message. And I wouldn't even call it disagreeing. It's more talking through different perspectives about how best to approach it. I will say, I would love to talk to Sara and Abby, because I'm working on messaging, and I would love to run some of the messaging we're working on, past you, and get some feedback on it. I don't know. I think we've worked on this so long together, and we fundamentally come from similar perspectives. And so our conversations are more about strategy, about how to do better on getting our message out, than it is disagreeing on the absolute core of the policy that we're dealing with.
But it seems like a common thread between all three of us is really, it's something that's missing now for many couples. I mean, if you look at the number one reason for divorce for, decades in America has been money, but now politics is creeping up there as one of the main reasons for divorce in couples. And just because everything's political, heck, we can't even watch the Super Bowl now without it being political. So it's become taken over our lives. And so it seems like a common thread from all three of us is listen to the other side. You may disagree, but guess what? You're probably going to learn something. Just give them a chance to speak and actually listen to them. It seems like we're all three kind of saying that same thing.
Well, almost, Collin. I think Sarah's probably thought about breaking up with me probably, several times. I know that we've had some discussions. She's like, you weren't this Republican when we started dating. And, we're many years
Well,
into
Aaron, there's
our
5
relationship.
people on this podcast who all wonder why she hasn't. So, All right, let's get into our agenda because I want to respect everybody's time. Great discussion. Thank you. We've got a few topics we want to get into, and we're going to start with this. We're going to talk about threats to democracy. These are our Empower to Win topics. Brief promo for Cor Strategies' brand new platform called Empower to Win. It's a tool made available to right-of-center candidates, politicos, that helps provide them information, polling, messaging assistance, forums, everything to help us support each other. And one of the things that we did this month is we did an in-depth survey on threats to democracy. Because when you look at the surveys that have happened the last 2 or 3 years, and you ask Americans, what's your number one issue? It's been threats to democracy since about 2021. That has been the number one issue to voters, including Illinoisans. We just took a poll last month, and threats to democracy was number one in Illinois. The problem is none of us know what the heck that means. And so through Empower to Win, we have done a deep dive into learning what does threats to democracy mean. And I'm not going to give away the whole farm here. So we've got 3 topics. We'll give away a few little tidbits that we learned, but you got to become a subscriber if you want to get the whole thing. So I encourage you to do so. But there's 3 things we're going to cover here that we can dive into that I think our guests today will have a unique perspective on. First thing is just the idea of threats to democracy. Lane's going to bring this up on screen in post, but what we just saw in a poll just about a week ago was that 81% of Illinoisans are concerned about this issue of threats to democracy, and only 5% are not. Ask Aaron, ask Leslie, when you have an issue that 81% are concerned about and only 5 are not, that is universal. That is a massive issue that people are concerned about. When we ask people, does this make you afraid for the future? 79% said they were afraid for the future because of threats to democracy. This is a huge issue right now when it comes to voters. So I just want to stop there and just have a quick discussion about what have you guys seen on this issue? What does it bring to your minds about when you hear people say threats to democracy? What does that make you think about? And it's a free-for-all, so anyone can jump in.
Well, I'll jump in. First of all, I am shocked by that, to be honest. I've done a lot of work on talking to voters, independent voters, Republican voters over the last couple of years. Never once has that topic come up. And we've had open, what are you most concerned about? Give us 3 things. So I guess one of my questions to you is, what were the other choices along that? Because what I hear from voters, and maybe this is part of what people think are threats to democracy, I hear people are concerned about taxes, and taxes going up with literally no representation, particularly in Illinois, because we have politicians who say anything and then go to Springfield and do whatever they want, or only really work for the special interest. I hear about public safety really being incredibly concerning with all the Safety Act, the criminals being let out, and then now the migrant issue. And so that is a threat to democracy in a different way. I walk precincts and I see signs in the Democrat households, threat to democracy, that's Trump. Yep. So really, what does that mean? And what were the other options that people had? Because I think before we can start to think about how we address those with our voters, we have to understand what that means to them.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we did this work. And so I'll say one of the things we did is we asked people, open-ended. So this was a pretty expensive survey, which is why I'm not giving it away, because we had to have an open-ended question. We said, when you hear threats to democracy, what do you think? And we had people write their responses back. And so my team put together a word cloud on this. And what's crazy is everyone had a different answer. To your point, Leslie, there is not one consistent thing. Yet maybe some things popped up more than others, like Trump, January 6th, migrants, some things popped up more than others. But in general, there was very little disagreement because there's not one way to describe threats to democracy. As you said, some people say it's the economy, and that's a threat to our democracy. Some people say it's illegal immigration or migrants. Some people say it's Trump, and some said Biden. A lot of people said Republican or Democrat. Everyone has a different a description of what threats to democracy means. And so it isn't really an issue. It's not one specific issue. It's more a feeling than anything else, but it's tied everything together where now when you ask people, are you concerned about this? far and away is the number one thing that they'll come back with. But to your point, it's never, no one has the same definition for what this means.
I wonder if it's kind of an overall sense of our Constitution is under attack, just broadly from so many different areas, and that is a threat to our democracy. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, listen, some people will say, hey, it's Trump, and some people will say it's, you know, the insurrection, or maybe we had a lot of people, a scary number of people who came back and said, I'm afraid there's going to be a dictator in the White House. Some said that might be Trump. Some said that might be Biden. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of people who are now thinking about sort of the foundation of our country. And there's also part of this where we've just made people so afraid that ultimately now some things that are smaller issues with respect we've just exploded into these massive issues, made them seem so much bigger because, let's be honest, we can get them to donate if we convince them that the world's going to end tomorrow. So both parties do this where we freak people out. So hopefully they go vote the way we want or they donate to our campaigns. The problem is we're freaking them out. And that's why you get 79% who said they're afraid for the future. We purposely use that word fear because we figured it. Some people would go, oh, I'm concerned, but afraid? No, I'm not afraid. No, 4/5 of the voters out there say they're afraid. And that's on both parties. We've both contributed to making this a country that's now afraid.
Are you afraid, Sarah?
I mean, right this moment. No, but I can see that. I mean, I could probably sit down and list 10 things that I think, I mean, easily that, you know, are not like an immediate concern, but that you can see them really, you know, the gathering moss, you know, as it goes kind of situation for sure.
I think the other thing too is that we're so polarized as parties, either Republican or Democrat, and we're so far apart. There's no more middle ground. There's no more, you know, hey, we can agree on this. We're so far. Yeah, there's reasonability. I think the Republican Party needs to come up with new conspiracy theories because all the ones that we've had before turned out to be true. And we have to find new things to talk about. But I know that over here, I get the roll of the eye and I get the head of the turn. And because we're on TV, I think she's going to be a little bit more restrained. But some of the things that we talk about at the house or that I bring back home from one of our Republican events are challenging, right, to have discussions on because parties are so far apart.
Well, but I think, Sarah, I would ask you, like, if you list, it's okay, just because, you know, we've got both conservatives and maybe liberals here, it's all right to be in a disagreement. I mean, what would you think are threats? What would you say are sort of those threats to democracy to you? I'm sure Trump probably takes the top. What else would be on that list?
I mean, I don't know that I would say Trump is a general, but I think things like fighting a peaceful transfer of power is an issue. I think that there's so many things. Gerrymandering is an issue. I think, you know, having so many positions that do not have to have bipartisan voting is a major issue because that really just they can just, you know, tailor their message only to their you know, already very dedicated base, which just makes us further and further apart. I think having a political partisan Supreme Court is a problem. I mean, I don't know. I could go on, but
that's great. That's awesome.
This question, but
but I think that's the point is that each person would have different answers. I mean, I'd ask you, like, what comes to your mind? I'm sure again, Trump probably number one, but what comes to your mind when you hear threats to democracy?
I mean, I think overall my fear of threats to democracy is something that like you and Leslie kind of touched on is it's not like one specific thing or even two specific things. It's so many things and things have become so polarized and both parties have become just so split that people like myself, who is very like centrist and in the middle, like I'm just looking for someone to be reasonable with. Like, can we just please have a like calm, cool, collected conversation without saying like the world is ending? And like there's less and less of us these days, and that is scary to me because I don't want to be forced to vote for someone who wants to, you know, turn our country into socialism. And I don't want to vote for someone who, you know, wants to take away, you know, women's rights or, you know, someone like Trump, whatever.
You can say it. It's all right.
You know,
extremism either direction.
extremism either way. And I feel like as years go by, I'm being boxed into like having to choose, and I don't want to have to choose because I don't agree either way. And
Well, it's interesting you say that because my team's going to kill me because the more we talk, the more I'm going to give away from our survey. But what's interesting is if you look at the people who said that they were afraid or that they thought that these threats were significant, it got the highest towards the edge. The more you got to the middle with moderates, with independents, they were the least afraid of any subgroup. They were the least to say that there are threats to democracy. They're like, guys, chill out. Everything's actually okay. So your point is pretty valid. As more of the centrist of the six of us, you're actually representing what we saw in that survey, which is actually, guys, chill out. I think we're okay. Everyone needs to just calm down. That's a valid position.
Just take a breath. Like, it's fine. Just we can talk about it.
Yeah, that's something we saw.
Collin, you know what's troubling to me about this question coming up is that it seems like there's one party that's promoting the idea of threats to democracy. It's not the Republicans who are bringing up that issue. It's really the Democrats that are bringing up that issue. And they're doing it, I believe, because the Democrats' policies have been bad. They've been failures. And so what they're doing is they're trumping up the threats to democracy thing to kind of
Unintended.
well, I think they're doing it deliberately to take the eye off of the performance of their bad policies. And I'm concerned here that maybe that strategy is working and that they're getting some penetration with that idea among voters as a way to, take people's eyes off of what's really going wrong under, Biden's policies, for example, or under, Illinois Democrat policies here in the state.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect shift to our next topic. So let me use that as a transition to our next topic here, which is, because you're right, it has worked. And this is definitely a concept that Democrats have pushed. We've got the data. This is something Democrats have pushed to the forefront on purpose, because this is how politics works. You want to drive a wedge where you sit on the better side of that wedge. It's just, we both parties do this. And Democrats figured out well before Republicans that on threats to democracy, they come out ahead, we come out behind. So you're right, this has been pushed by Democrats and Republicans are behind on it. And if we go into November behind on this, we're going to lose. And so this next topic is to what you said, that Democrats have been painting Republicans as extremists. Sometimes we help them do that, but they've been painting us as extremists who will, here's the key phrase, take away your rights and freedom. There was a Democrat bill. Right now we're in primary season, and there was a Democrat mailer that was just sent out that I flagged immediately because it was done in a Dem primary, but you can see it was a nod towards what their messaging is going to be in the general election. Lane will bring it up in post here, a Sonia Khalil mailer in their Democratic primary in the city where she said, I'm quoting, with our rights and freedom literally on the line. This is what the Democrats are pushing, is that our rights and our freedom are on the line in this election. And you even saw Pritzker came out about 6-8 months ago in a public interview and said, we need to talk more about rights and freedom because that's where we're headed. And you saw him shift his messaging on this. The Democrats are making a concerted effort on this to focus on rights and freedom. Even when it comes to abortion, you notice it's not about abortion or pro-choice anymore. It's taking away your rights. It's a subtle shift in how they're presenting it. But Democrats are going into 2024 on rights and freedom. That is what they're going to focus on. And if we don't catch up on the Republican side, this could kill us in November.
But when you come to rights and freedom, that is the platform of the Republican Party.
Well, that's exactly right.
We are about.
But has it been? When have we talked about it? Has it
well,
been?
No, we're being misrepresented in the media, right? They're trying to take our farthest right groups that, that maybe can't present as well as others that have been in the political circle for many more years, and they're trying to say, hey, look, this far right person is what we represent. We're not. We're about conservative values. We're about integrity. We're about, voter access. Of course, we're about voter access. We just want only people to vote once per person, right? We're all about freedom. What about the Second Amendment? What about those issues? What about our Constitution? We're talking about democracy. Our democracy is emboldened in our Constitution. That's our party thinks. Sara may disagree with me on some of those issues. We're talking about freedom, and you're talking about abortion. We're like, who's holding the rights of the unborn? They should have rights too. I know that's a polarized.
But Aaron, here's my thing though. When have we framed it as rights and freedom though? We've kind of gone away from this a bit where you're right. This was a Republican cornerstone. Go back to Reagan. This was one of the cornerstones of the Republican Party, but which Republican representative or leader nationally in the last decade or two has really grabbed onto that Republicans are the party of freedom and of rights? Honestly, we've been subverted on this successfully.
Well, we've
Well, I
talked about this here at home, and Sarah said that, I talked about Reagan when we said, hey, make America great again. That whole slogan, right? That was originally Reagan slogan. We've talked about it. And Sarah has always said that we're not the party of Reagan anymore. I mean,
Yeah, well,
I
she's not wrong. I mean, we're the
used
party
to
of
lean
Trump
more
at this point.
Republican, and
Even if you like Trump, can you tell me that Trump's about rights versus Trump's being about just whatever he woke up and decided that morning when he rolled out of bed? Like, we aren't that party of Reagan anymore. I don't think Sarah's wrong.
But I think relatively speaking, we are more a party of freedom than the Democrats are, because I mean, just look at all of the policies, gas stoves and freedom of speech and, masking and all
the
the
rules
the-
and regulations
the
that come out of
top-down
Washington, DC.
forcing you must in Chicago, you must be vaxxed, or you can't go, into a restaurant without your vax card. I mean, so many things. And so, what they portray on Republicans is really what they're doing themselves. And I think what this speaks to, and I know that there have been a lot of us who've run for office, Aaron, you and I've tried to do this too, to get to a message that is consistent. But this is what happens when the Republicans don't stand for anything positive. All we do is say we're against this and we're against that. And we do not have a consistent, unified message. We let the candidate at the top of the ballot define who we are. And then we get someone, who is maybe not as more mainstream. And so that's what people think. And then the next time we have another candidate, we're whatever they stood for. So we need to define ourselves and not leave that void, so that we allow the Democrats to define us.
Well, and I know that's a big thing you're working on at the state party, Leslie. So thank you for your good work there. Let me just read for you a handful of the responses that we got back. It's always fun to read open-ended responses from normal humans, because once you weed out like the craziness, you get some interesting nuggets. But just some of these on rights, starting from the very conservative and moving down to very liberal. So at very conservative, government taking my guns, chipping away at personal freedoms, taking away my rights, not standing up for the written law, the Constitution, trying to force unwanted changes and causing me to lose my freedoms. Freedom again. This next one. So now we're getting more into the more moderate stage. Women's rights, taking away some of my rights, freedom of speech, human rights in general, threats to our freedom, the right to freedom, government telling me what we can or cannot do or have, extreme acts of violence, taking away my rights, freedom of speech, my rights are being violated, my rights are being taken away, respect and different views is being removed, political infighting. I'm tired of everyone thinking they know what's better for each other or for everyone else. Social and political extremism, the stability of human rights, not following the Constitution. I'm more towards the liberal side now. Women's rights, abortion, losing women's health care and women's rights, women being able to make their own decisions, their own choices, not following the Constitution, freedom to choose based on what we think is right. Just a couple more here. Voter suppression, lack of bipartisan cooperation, making laws that restrict personal freedoms, threats to our rights, taking away the partner of choice, dictators, I dread that deeply, civil liberties. You get the thread, you get the concept. I mean, there's never one consistent single thing, but you hear all throughout that freedom, rights, taking away my rights. It was huge in what we got back in these responses, and Democrats have done a great job of whipping this up. John is correct, but they've done it. This is the environment in which our candidates are going to need to run for office this November. If we can't handle this topic, we're going to be in trouble.
Well, I think also too, it's a lot of our messaging, right? One of the words that came up a couple of times besides freedom when you were reading those out was care, right? They started using the words care and everything. Women's health care, gender-affirming care, right? Like everything has to be pointed at care. So who doesn't want to give somebody care, right? Or who does that's what we're getting wrong in the messaging, right? We used to be, pro-life. We had the messaging right back then. Now we're sampling on people's care and women's health care, which is going to get me in trouble right now because I can see
No,
that.
but Aaron, I get your point. I don't think you're wrong. I mean, first of all, we don't talk about that Jack Kemp style Republican where we care for other people, that Paul Ryan Republican where we care for those around us. So you're not wrong. And again, if you want to make somebody seem extreme, just say, hey, they're trying to take away your rights. And that's what the Democrats have said. So when Republicans say pro-life, here's the thing. It's not about what you say. It's about what your audience hears. So yeah, we might say pro-life nowadays, but what your audience hears is taking away rights. They framed it in such a way, just like we did with the death tax, where we framed it really well. Leslie's right. It's how we message things. But right now we are getting lapped in the messaging department by the other side. And we don't have a lot of time to right the ship on this. All right, let's go to the last topic on this, on the same topic, just the last point on this topic, which is something that scared the bejesus out of me. I gotta be honest. So one of the questions that we asked was, do you believe we must fight to protect our democracy, even if that means that violence is required? And I gotta tell you, this scares me. Only a third of Illinoisans said that they disagree. I'm sorry, hold on, let me get this right. A third of Illinoisans said that they agree with that viewpoint, that violence might be required. 1/3 said that violence might be required. Here's the thing that scares me, though. Only 40% said they disagree. And the reason why I point to that is, sure, 33% that says yes and 40% that says no, that means no is winning. But here's the thing. You should not be in the I don't know stage on that question. And so if you're in the middle on that, I count you as, well, maybe, which means you're open to violence. So the fact remains 2/3 of Illinoisans either say, yeah, violence might be needed, or maybe violence is okay. I mean, we have reached a stage in our politics that people are at that point where they say, and it's both parties. I'll go through the kind of the splits in a little bit, but this isn't a one party. This is a pox on all of us. Both parties' voters are saying, yeah, violence might be needed. That scares me.
Well, as a former fighter, I don't ever take violence off the table. But, I think that it is a scary situation. I don't think that we need to start our own insurrection here in Palatine. But I can tell you, it frustrates people. Like when we have some of the hypocrisy that we see through the Democrats, and we see some of their policies where they say one thing, they do a completely other. You get angry, right? And you want to do something about it. Go ahead.
I'm sure Sara would say it's the same. She sees
salad
hypocrisy in Republicans, and she gets angry about it. I mean, anger's real. We all feel it.
Well, I mean, I guess I would say that certainly if you feel like that's coming from that side, it's coming from both. I mean, we just had
Well, listen, if you watch our show,
had
you
an
see
immigration bill get kicked back by the people who proposed it because they didn't want Democrats to have a
Yeah.
win.
We're not securing the border because we wanted the political win. So you're not wrong, Sara. I mean, here's the thing on this show. If you watch more than one episode, which we're at 40, I think, or roughly 40 episodes now, we call out our own party too, because we can be hypocrites as well. And it causes people to be angry, but then they take that anger to the next level and are wanting to do something violent about it. And that's where I think all of us kind of have to take a breath and go, have we made people too scared? Have we made people too angry at this point?
I might disagree a little bit on that border bill, though, because just as an example, I mean, that's what you hear that, oh, the Republicans just didn't want to give a win to President Biden and the group who pushed that forward. But there's a lot, if you look in the details of that bill, that shows it wasn't really solving the problem. And if you're actually trying to solve a problem, you're not going to allow 5,000 people to come in every single day. There were a lot of things in there that I think people who have principles might want to stop it for. And I think this just further exacerbates the problem of misinformation, which causes us to not listen to each other, which causes us to push our own areas. And if we could actually agree on a solution and not be just inching forward, little things, we might actually get to something people.
We heard that a lot in these open-ended responses about what's the solution to this. And one of the things we heard the most was people just want information, and they want unbiased, factual information. What ends up happening is on the right, you turn on Fox News or you go on, maybe one of our social media profiles, and what you hear is this was a bad bill because it didn't have these things in it. And then on the left, they hear, well, you know what? Trump did say he doesn't want to give Biden a win, so it's just them being hypocrites. And there's not really one just factual thing that says, okay, yeah, there were some Republicans who had political motivations, but here's also the reasons why they didn't think this was a good bill. And then on the Democrats say, well, here's why some people thought it was good, and here's why some people thought it wasn't good. Those news sources, those unbiased sources, do not exist today. And it only further exacerbates the problem, where we instead just get angry at each other and yell at each other instead of just sitting down. If you have a chance, watch last week's episode. We had manufacturers on who weren't political, and it was amazing. We'd bring up something as an issue, and then two of them would go, okay, I would do this, I would do that. Here, we've solved the problem. I was like, why aren't you guys running the country? Because that's how the average American thinks. But in our politics, we get into our tribes and our sides, and we just want to attack each other. So it really was a desire for unbiased information, to your point, Leslie, that a lot of Americans say this is what we want, and this would help us avoid these threats to democracy.
I think a bigger issue with Collin, besides for that, is that most Americans don't vote. When you have local elections that have a 12% or 18% voter turnout, when you have national elections that have less than 50% turnout, right? It's time to get a helmet and get in the game if you want to make change. If you're going to, the people that are voting the most, you're far right, you're far left, they're voting 100% of the time. So those are the ones that we're listening to because they're the ones that vote for us.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Vote matters anymore because, you know, you vote and then it just goes to, Sara mentioned the gerrymandering, and then there's the just voter integrity issues that are out there. I mean, there's just so much. It's just, why bother? I mean, that's what I heard when I talked to voters.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. All right, let's get,
Let me
John,
just
if
say
you don't
one
mind,
thing.
let me,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just going to say, just because we're running out of time, I want to get us moving to some of the other things on the agenda. I appreciate everybody and your thoughts. Leslie, I want to go straight to you on this, just because as the state's comptroller, you're going to have a great perspective on this. You know, we're talking about, it was brought up a couple times here, the migrant crisis. Just this week, Pritzker announced that despite the fact that next year the state is facing a pretty significant deficit, he wants to spend yet another, 160 million? I think it is. Hold on, let me get it. 180 million here the state wants to add to what they've already spent towards the migrant crisis at a time when we don't have the funds. I just want to open it up. What are your thoughts on this? Of without Springfield's approval, without going to the voters or Springfield for approval on this, Pritzker is going to add even more funding. I mean, we're at over $500 million that the state has spent on the migrant crisis, let alone other entities. As the former comptroller of the state of Illinois, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's just more evidence that the leaders of our state continue to think that just because we have checks in the checkbook, they think that means we have money in the bank to pay any of this stuff. You know, they're continually spending on things that we don't have the money to pay for. And, you know, it even comes from our existing comptroller who talks about how we have these surpluses in places, and yet a lot of that was from one-time COVID money. So, and the sad thing is we vote for this. A majority, excuse me, a majority of voters vote for these leaders. And so, you know, the way to change it is to get truth out about what is really going on. You know, we were able to fight back on the graduated income tax because I think we did a good job of getting really the truth out about what that was about. And voters then had information to make a decision that was right for them. But when we fail on that, it doesn't get picked up, and we have leaders who literally have no connection. It's been going on for a long time to the money that we have available to what they decide to spend it on. And this is something that I'm sure the governor thinks is going to help him get votes. So
yeah, well, what I love is it's amazing how for the years of the COVID money coming in, the narrative, which was pushed by, of course, Pritzker and the Democrats, was no, we just balanced our books. We're really good with the finances. It's not these billions of dollars that are flowing into our coffers from DC. Now that the money is disappearing and we have deficits, they're all saying, oh, this is just because the federal money has disappeared. We've done a really good job. So wait a second, you can't have it both ways. Either the surpluses were because of this money, or it was because you balanced the books, but you don't get to have the best of both worlds on this situation. But of course, the media doesn't call them out on it. And so you're right. We're suddenly now facing what could be a $500 million deficit, if not more, in the state's budget. And now suddenly people are realizing we might have to tighten our belts because the COVID money is stopping.
And it is the role of the state controller to actually be that voice of fiscal sanity in the government, and from a balanced and nonpartisan point. But we do not have a comptroller who does that. So
yeah, well, and certainly not a comptroller who's balanced and bipartisan. Aaron, what were you going to say?
What I was going to say is one thing I think that people haven't figured out yet, and people that they should be holding more accountable that they're not, is our congressmen, right? We have 17 congressmen in the state of Illinois, 15 of them are Democrats. If you've ever, I don't know when the last time that you were in downtown Chicago, but the migrant crisis is a true issue, right? It's a lot easier for us sitting in Palatine or sitting in wherever we're at to say, oh, we shouldn't be spending our money down there. But when you go down there and, you know, because we go to the city quite often, that you see migrant people that don't have options, that are out on the street with their small children, that are selling candy or gum or whatever it is, and they don't, you know, basically they have everything they have right there with them. It's heartbreaking. And that is a federal issue. Illinois was not designed to be able to house 30,000 migrants. When people think about that number, think about all of Wrigley Field. That is what we're talking about, that are currently in
or 6 White Sox games, because that's about
6 White Sox games, right? Or 6 White Sox games. But what I'm saying is that we don't have the funding to do that. Even if we all wanted to do it, which I believe we do, because we want to take care of those as a party, those that are less fortunate or displaced, we don't have the funds to be able to do it. And we need to be pushing at our congressmen, right? Our congressmen to be able to do something at a federal level and to be able to make real change in that, right? And they're not making any kind of moves. Sara likes to blame the Republicans. We only got 2 Republican congressmen in Illinois, and we have 15 that are Democrats, they're not making any moves either to make a change on the immigration issue. And I think a lot of that should be falling on them because they're our federal representatives.
And
Yeah, I
this
mean, it definitely is something where the federal government has to step up. And again, who leads the federal government? It's the president. It's a Democrat in the White House. You've got a Democrat majority in the Senate. So you've got all these people who want to blame Washington. 2/3 of Washington is run by Democrats. So it's both parties. I'm not saying one party holds this, but for those who want to say this is all Republicans' fault in Washington, you can't make that argument when Democrats control 2/3 of the levers of government in Washington. So, all right, let me move us along just because of time. So
All right.
I want to go into something that I think will get some conversation, hopefully from Abbey and Sara specifically. So when there's a bill filed in Springfield that even Kelly Cassidy, who she is pretty much the furthest left or one of the furthest left people in Springfield, when even she says, no, that's cray-cray, you know it's pretty crazy. So there was a bill filed by Representative Anastasia Murray, who lots of Democrats don't like to align with because she can tend to get a little crazy, that has made denying abortion or gender-affirming care to minors officially child abuse. And so if you don't let a minor get an abortion or gender-affirming care, you could be charged with child abuse, is what this bill would allow. And it's not just for the immediate family members. Anyone responsible for the child's welfare could be charged with child abuse for this. And here's the crazy thing. It also provides that a healthcare professional could render abortion services or gender-affirming services without getting any penalties, without requiring official valid consent. All they have to do is a good faith representation by the minor who says, oh yeah, I got that, we're good. And now they're going to be allowed to get that abortion if this bill were to pass. It's not going to pass. But when you talk about how far left the Democratic Party and some of the progressives have gone in this state, this is a great example where, again, even Kelly Cassidy is like, listen, I support abortion, I support gender-affirming care, but maybe let's draw the line at saying that if you don't give it to them, that's child abuse. Let's maybe draw the line at that. So again, even Kelly Cassidy disagrees with this bill, but just wanted to open it up for discussion because we've talked about a lot that, yeah, Republicans in many things have maybe gone a little too far to the right. And I'm sure that Abbey and Sara could point to some examples in this state and even nationally. Democrats have also gone way far to the left. And this is yet another example. So I'm just curious if either of you guys have thoughts. I'm sure it's the first you're hearing of the bill, and I'm not asking you to take a position on the bill. Just in general, how does that make you feel?
Sounds like a threat to democracy to me.
and our freedom and parents decide what happens with children.
I mean, that is the first time I've heard of that. And I feel like I'm a little bit like Abbey in that extremism either way really freaks me out. It's scary. And that's a little scary. But generally, because I feel like as a parent, it just seems like that's a really personal family issue that I know that I wouldn't want those issues if we were having those discussions in our home. I guess I don't want somebody else's input, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
These are kind of like two issues that have made me kind of not be so excited to vote for Democrats over the last like 5 or so or maybe longer years. Just because it is an example of them going way too much for me to be able to be okay with it. Especially the gender affirming part. Like, I mean, I know a couple trans people and they're obviously way happier since they transitioned, but they did that when they were adults and they were confident in who they wanted to be and how they felt. We're talking about children and even teenagers who they change their minds all the time. Like, what child at 10 years old knows for certain, absolute certainty, no, I want to change my gender and I'm never, ever going to change my mind.
Well, and this is if you read the bill, and again, I know this is new for everybody, so I'm not expecting you guys to have read the bill, but I have because I'm a nerd. And when you read the bill, basically the way this is written is to Abby's description. You have a 12-year-old that comes to you and says, I don't want to be a boy anymore, Mom, I want to be a girl. And you say, well, why don't you just wait and think about it? That runs afoul of this bill. That was child abuse, according to this bill. Like that is how crazy this bill has come, where even if you're just like, hey, let's wait. If they wanted it and you didn't give it to them, that's child abuse. That's what this bill says. I mean, it is as extreme gets. And that's on abortions, that's on gender affirming care. And all that child now has to do is go to a doctor and say, yeah, I talked to my mom, it's good. And now that doctor basically has to give them that care that you as a parent said you didn't want them to have. I mean, it's going more and more into taking away freedoms. As we talk about threats to democracy, you no longer have the right to parent if you live in Illinois, if bills like this are coming to the floor.
Yeah, I
Colin,
mean,
this is absolutely crazy, right? So if you have a 5-year-old that comes to you and says they want to be a pirate, you're going to be able to hack off their leg and hand them a parrot. I mean, like this is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. I mean, it just doesn't shouldn't even be existing in the world. And I love being on your podcast, but I'm upset that we're even having this conversation, right? I mean, it just seems completely ludicrous. This is not what either party should be about.
And
Well, I mean, Ludacris is on our minds since he basically saved the halftime show along with Little John onto the Super Bowl. So there you go. Leslie, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I mean, everybody knows how hard it is sometimes to be a teenager as we go through those like growing years. And, for those of us who have had teenage children, you can see it. But then at the other end of this, if the state is starting to take over the role of the parent and actually ignore the needs, the parent's wishes, going through what they think is best for their own children, on the back end of it is the parents will be responsible for the disaster that's left if something was done where it wasn't the right decision. And, it's been forced down with no input. And so again, just another loss of freedom. And, this is probably why people are feeling like up is down and down is up. How could the state ever be in a situation where they might pass something they'd even think about giving this an option where it really takes the parents out of this very important decision? So
yeah, I mean, the only people that'll be happy about this are the trial lawyers who get to go sue every parent out there and make lots of money, which, that's part of why Springfield sometimes does stuff. All right, let's keep moving. So let's talk about corruption. We'll call this the corruption corner of our agenda because there's a couple corruption topics here. So just in the last couple of weeks, 2 more Illinois Democrats are now officially felons. One was Mike Madigan's chief of staff, who is now going to spend 2.5 years in prison. And then another is Democrat Annazette Collins, who's been found guilty on tax charges for cheating on her taxes. So we've got 2 more Illinois Democrats. This is stemmed from the corruption probe into Mike Madigan. This list just keeps on growing and growing. I guess I promised I wouldn't pass it to anybody, but Leslie, you had to deal with this personally. So I want you to start with this on just how frustrating is it to have spoken about this for years, about how corrupt Madigan and the Democrats are. And now suddenly, we see about it weekly in the news at this point.
Well, I think those of us who spent any time in Springfield certainly knew that this stuff was going on. I experienced it in the comptroller's office with people who were shoved into the comptroller's office as hires that we had to take, or similar things that went on with the Secretary of State's office. That was another place where people got stashed. And I think it's just more evidence that the Democrat Party in Illinois, despite what they say, is the party that works for the special interests. It does not work for regular people, and it is it's finally coming out, all their special interest connections, how they make decisions, because it benefits combat or it benefits, whoever. It is a cabal, and I think it's one of the other reasons why voter apathy continues to grow, because it seems like no matter what you do, it doesn't really matter. Somehow the forces are against you. So it's too bad that our state is the leader in corruption in the country.
Yeah, we really are at this point. I mean, it just keeps racking up. All right, anyone have thoughts on this? I know corruption.
Leslie had a great point though, but I wanted to take it one quick step further. We talk about all the corruption, and certainly that's awful. And we have so much of it here. We always joke that if, you flush twice in Chicago and it makes its way to Springfield, right? But the bigger issue, I think, too, though, is that, like to Leslie's point, is that we have people that have bad policy, certainly. But even worse, we have people that don't execute and implement good policy because they either are lacking the will to do it or they're lacking the ability to do it, which I think is a bigger issue. One of the reasons we have so much problems in Chicago is you just keep putting patronage jobs in there, people that are not qualified to do each of these positions, expect them to be able to execute, and they can't. And we as the taxpayers and we as the residents and citizens of Illinois are the ones that have to deal with the outcome.
Yeah, well, just look at how difficult it is to get anything done in the Cook County legal system, because most of the judges there were handpicked by some ward boss who just wanted to put a buddy in as a judge to give him a sweet pension. And as a result, nothing can get done in the Cook County judiciary. So it's to your point, Aaron. All right, just because of time, I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit in the agenda. We had some fun topics, but not ones that were overly great. For a topic like Sam McCann would be fun to talk about, but he's not worth our time. So we'll skip ahead. Let's talk about this because I know you guys have seen this. Pritzker and the Democrats in Springfield, they just keep getting more and more partisan. And this is something I've been screaming about for about a year. And finally, somebody picked it up. The Tribune ran a story about how, as they're handing out pork in some of these budgets, what is often done is maybe the majority party will get more money to spend because they're the majority party, but still the minority party will get some money to spend because, let's be honest, they also have residents and taxpayers in their districts too who deserve something. But there's been this practice under Pritzker where that has stopped. And now only Democrats get this pork and no Republicans. Finally, the Tribune ran a story on this. I've been screaming about this for like a year. I remember being on the phone with a Daily Herald reporter going, will you please write this story? So finally somebody wrote it because honestly, it's a huge sign of the partisanship in this state specifically, where Pritzker gets to be called, he calls himself bipartisan, likes to act like he's bipartisan, but he broke years and decades of tradition when it comes to these projects and completely denied Republicans any work in their districts. And so if you're a resident in a Republican district, Pritzker and the Democrats are saying, hey, listen, if you want representation in Springfield, if you want tax dollars coming back, your only hope is to vote for Democrat. Otherwise, we're not going to give you a penny. I mean, it's just completely inappropriate. And yet it's what's happening in this state, and not enough people are talking about how partisan J.B. Pritzker and the Democrats have become. So just curious, I'm sure Aaron and Leslie and John may have more thoughts on this than anybody else, but we've all dealt with just how partisan the Democrats have become in this state. As they like to claim they're bipartisan, they don't let us in. Ask the Republicans down in Springfield. They desperately have tried to get in the room to be part of the budget conversations, and Democrats won't even let them in the room. We're trying to govern. We're trying to be bipartisan, and yet they won't even let us at the table to have that conversation. So there is no bipartisanship in this state, and you can't blame that on Republicans.
Well, does it surprise to anyone that Pritzker wants to keep all the pork for himself? All right. I mean, if he's sitting at the head of the buffet, he doesn't want to share with anybody else, right? So why would he give any of it to Republicans? He's got to share with the Democrats, right? But,
A little reserved, I think, on that.
John, what are your thoughts?
I was thinking that sounds like another threat to democracy to me.
I mean, honestly, it is. We did see a lot of people when we asked them, what would you like to see that would make this better? Bipartisanship was one of the most returned responses in that. So you're right, John. I mean, this again, it's how you present it though, right? Where's the Republican who's out there saying this is a threat to democracy? We need to take their narrative and spin it against them. We've got to talk about these things. We've got to push it out. Now, kudos to the Illinois Republican Party, the House and Senate caucuses in Springfield. They've become so much more active, pushing narratives out over the last 12, 24 months or so. So huge kudos to them. It's still not enough. We've got to be on the fight constantly. And things like this, we should be spinning our way and say, this is a lack of bipartisanship. This is a threat to our very democracy. This should be better. We need to be out there saying those things.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to a local topic. I know none of us are DuPage County people or residents, but this popped up in DuPage County, and we got to talk about it. So some may have followed in Naperville. There's a city council member who's come out who said, hey, listen, you all want to fund the migrant crisis. Well, here's a sign-up sheet. Why don't you sign up to house migrants in your house? We're all wealthy suburbanites. If you got space, go house some migrants and don't be a hypocrite. We talked about that in previous weeks. We don't have time to really get into that this week. But here's what happened. So a bunch of Naperville Democrats and now DuPage County Democrats are calling to boycott a restaurant because that council member's son works at that restaurant. Our cancel culture has gotten to the point where we don't like so-and-so. And by the way, that person who's on the council, that's not a Republican. They're right of center, but that's a nonpartisan position. But they don't like that person's position. So they went and they found where that person's son works. And now they're actively boycotting that restaurant just because this guy's son happens to work there. I mean, at what point have we crossed the line and said we've gotten too political? Like, hey, Aaron, I disagree with your stances on stuff. So, where Connor works, I'm not going to give them any business. Like at some point, have we just become too political? This just drove me crazy when I read this story.
Well, most people think that we already have a migrant living in our house because they look at me and they just assume. But but she loves my jokes. You know what I mean? She's just so ready for the next one. Right? Or maybe they think we have a domestic terrorist because I've been growing out my beard.
Well, Del Mar is a Hispanic name, so
it is. But no, I think it's ludicrous to bring in family into it, right? I mean, it's completely offensive that, if one of our sons was working somewhere and somebody tried to boycott that restaurant or that business or whatever it was and hurt that other family and all the people's families that work at that restaurant and drive a living from it because they don't share beliefs, but yet they're talking about freedom of speech or they're talking about how we should have equal rights. This is a threat to democracy, that we don't want to speak up on what we believe in because we're afraid that there's going to be repercussions for our children or family or where they work. I don't know, Sarah, what do you think about it?
Well, I actually saw this one line on the agenda and I was like, that's crazy. You know, I kind of read through it really quick. Nothing. I was like, no, don't know about that. Don't know about that. And then I thought, that's crazy. And I looked it up, and the only thing that I could find on it was this 10-second AI generated TikTok message. So I don't know like how thorough the campaign for this activity is.
Yeah, and just to make sure I'm clear, it's one of our political people who lives in that area who's reported back she's reported back that it's something they're pushing like through their networks. It's not like it's been in the news. It hasn't been a public thing. It's something they're just pushing. But she let us know about it, which I appreciate. And I'm like, come on, that's nuts. Now both sides do it. I'm sure there are plenty of examples of conservatives boycotting places because they don't like that liberals are there. So I'm not simply saying this is only one side, but it's just the latest example, and it's just what happened this week. So it was worth talking about.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a crossing of a line though, when, you know, it's one thing to say, oh, I'm not going to buy this product at the grocery store because I don't like what that company is doing or whatever. But it really begins to cross a line when you start showing up in person and boycotting or, you know, targeting a specific individual and not just some broad issue. And I think it's just further evidence of how, you know, I mean, we've seen it happen with like the burning of the cities, like just all these things. People don't like something, and the activism that has been generated over the last chunk of years, and the action that comes from that activism is not a healthy thing. People are no longer just talking things out and allowing different opinions. So,
well, and I think Leslie, go ahead, Sarah.
Hopefully it doesn't really come to pass and their business doesn't suffer and everything will be fine, because everyone makes their own personal decisions, you know? So hopefully they like the pancakes enough or whatever that they're
or the waffles. Always the waffle. The waffles are more
the
important.
pancakes.
Well, listen, like there was a business out by us that, you know, was up in McHenry County, and they decided to get super political, and they were left of center. And I remember saying to Abby, like, okay, you know, you kind of bring this on yourself when you are overtly political as a business and you're left of center in deep red McHenry County, and you're like, oh, gee, no one's coming to my business anymore. Like, you've brought it on yourself then. Right. But that was conservative saying, fine, you want to be overly political, then we're just not going to go to your business. So we do it too. And I think, Leslie, you helped me because I was struggling to find the line here. And I do think you gave a good one, which is like, all right, you know what? I don't like Chick-fil-A's policies, so I'm not going to go eat God's chicken. But, you know, when it comes to like an individual, I'll go eat at the local Waffle House, just even though like someone might work there that maybe I disagree with. Like, I think that takes it across the line when it's that personal. I think you might have hit on something there where it's a good line to have.
But we're just, you know,
I don't care about Chick-fil-A's policies. I just like their chicken. Like, I don't care about their political stances.
No, I've been over here sacrificing for years because I haven't had my coconut almond fudge from Ben & Jerry's because I refuse to funnel my money back to the Democratic Party, right? I mean, I'm missing out on meals and desserts over here, my friend, because
listen, and here's where I'll say I'm a bad conservative because I still give Disney my business because I like their stuff and I love Star Wars. Like, you know, I don't do these boycotts. I eat Ben & Jerry's. I go to Chick-fil-A. I go to Home Depot. Conservative or liberal, I don't care. If I like your products, I'm going to use your products. I'm a capitalist more than I'm a politico. So to me, good products, I'll use them. Bad products, I won't. I don't care about your politics. Now, I know I'm unique in that, but I don't care about this stuff. So that's why I know I'm not the best person to draw the line, because to me, I'm not going to boycott any business for their political stances. I don't care.
Collin, we have to correct you real quick, though, too. God's chicken is at Popeyes. It's not at Chick-fil-A.
Well, I do like Popeye's chicken. I do very much enjoy Popeye's chicken, but yeah, and their fries, their biscuits are excellent too.
I think they sprinkle crack on them. You know what I mean?
A little bit. That's that New Orleans flavor, that little New Orleans style, that Nolans little taste. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next topic. We've only got a few more before we close for today. But someone said this earlier. Forgive me that I don't remember, because I do have the world's worst memory, as Abby will attest. But someone talked about having things that we could push forward, that we could be for and be positive about. And that's what this next topic is, because I've had a number of conversations the last 2 weeks with people who are just amazed at the turnaround in Illinois and down in Springfield. For years, a lot of us would get frustrated because Republicans only ever stood against things. We were only saying, saying, no, that's a bad bill, that's a bad policy, and that's all we ever did. And the problem with that is twofold. One, where's our vision for where things should be? But two, if all you do is try to stop bad things, let's say there's 10 bad bills and you stop 7 of them, well, 3 still got through. And if this happens cycle after cycle, you're going the wrong direction. And so there were many of us who were calling for a change in direction, a more positive direction, something that showed what we actually do stand for, and filing bills and pushing forward initiatives that say, hey, listen, here's something that would actually make things better. We talked a lot about this a few weeks ago in our Springfield episode. We talked about it last week, even in our manufacturing episode. So I don't want to rehash things we've covered on previous SFRs. But after last week's SFR, even in that conversation, in that room, I had a number of manufacturers who said, man, times have changed. It is so cool to see that we have representation down in Springfield, that there's a SAM caucus of small and mid-sized manufacturers standing up for us. That they're actually pushing forward bills that if these passed would help us instead of hurting us. This has never happened before in our lifetimes. There is a change. There's more positivity. Kudos to McCombie and to Curran and the House and Senate caucuses for leading the way on this, and for a number of other entities. There are bills now being passed and pushed forward, at least. There was one this week. Stoller and Elick pushed forward a bill that would allow small businesses to put their earnings into small business savings accounts so that they could save up to invest in their businesses, and that would be tax-free so they could invest into their businesses. Things that may or may not pass. That's just one example of good ideas being brought forward that maybe pass, maybe don't, but we're finally talking about positive things that could make things better for Illinoisans. This is a change, and it's an era of positivity that I was pretty excited about. I wanted to bring it up and just see if anyone had thoughts. I think it was one of you, John or Leslie, that had said, kind of brought this up. So if it was, why don't you jump in and lead us off?
It was me.
There you go.
This is actually coming out of the work that the team that I've been leading with a group of folks has been working on for the past 2.5 years. And we presented some of the information to the State Central Committee a couple of years ago. And it came out of focus groups we did with voters all over the state, where they said the Democrats are the party of corruption and political insiders, but the Republicans are the party of no. Because we don't stand for anything. And so we've been really working on driving a positive message. And I've had, or members of my team have had a lot of conversations with with Tony and with the Senate caucus, and trying to push a positive, here's what we stand for. Even though we're in the super minority, we can still say, we have a better idea, and here is our idea, and this is what we want to lead on, and give voters a positive thing to think about and vote for. And so I think over the next, we're very close to rolling out some new messaging. And in the next couple of months, I'm hoping that we will see a different Republican Party that is bringing forth a positive, proactive, we work for you kind of a message. And so it's great to see that it's showing up in legislation and bills and proactive things that are good, instead of just fire this person, fire that, no mandates, no masks, no nothing. So
yeah, no, I like it. And honestly, it shows we have a direction, that there is a better path. I can understand why Republicans in Springfield got burned out, because you put forward some good ideas, they never get a hearing. And most of these bills, let's be honest, are not going to go anywhere because they're good ideas, and Democrats just aren't going to let them have a hearing because they're good ideas, and they don't want to give Republicans a win. Just like I'm sure if we were in charge, we probably would do the same thing to the other side. So I get it. So most of these bills won't go anywhere. And so you do that year after year, you probably just give up and say, forget it. I'm going to stop doing all this extra work. So I get why it stopped happening, but I'm kudos to you, Leslie, and your team and everyone else who's been doing this, because we got to stand for something instead of constantly just being against things. And it's really heartening to see that this has been a movement over the last few years, and it's a great direction for our party.
it's like turning a battleship around, but we're getting there. So.
I mean, I'll ask as more of the centrist, Abby, especially since I've done most of the talking here. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that, right? That Republicans tend to just be the party of no and don't really have too many ideas that we push forward. Is this having more positivity instead of negativity and having our own ideas? Is that something you think might be good?
I mean, I'm always in favor of positivity to the point where it annoys you. So
yeah. This is true. Whenever there's storm clouds, Abby always finds the one ray of sunshine, and it drives me crazy.
The silver lining is always there somewhere, right?
But Sarah, I don't know. Abby kind of failed me here with giving thoughts, so I'll pass it over to you.
Well,
As someone who probably gets frustrated at Republicans, it's got to be nice to see that we maybe are trying to push forward our own ideas.
Honestly, you know, I feel like I've kind of been pictured as the Democrat in this discussion, which I would say that I am these days. But I would say that in general, I'm frustrated by politics in general.
Mhm.
And I feel like they're all failing us. And at a certain level, corruption begins to set in, even to people who didn't expect it or didn't want it. And so I'm heartened by anyone who wants to have actual ideas and move actual solutions forward instead of just being bitchy to each other. Pardon my French. You know, that's what it
Just
feels like a
screaming
lot
at
of
each
the
other
time.
with no answers.
Yeah, I mean, so nobody has an idea. We all just hate each other. And it just feels like this terrible circle of nothing,
Mhm.
you know, to people who are not involved in politics. It's like, well, what are we doing to solve any of this? There are solutions. They might not be perfect. And, you know, we can change them. Like, it's sort of like parenting. If this doesn't work out quite right, we can try something different, you know? So
What do you-
I love to hear that. I'd love to hear somebody who wants to, you know, get some real ideas on the table.
Well,
What do you
I
think?
might be calling you and running some of these things behind you before we actually like produce these spots. So
Nice. What do you think, Abby?
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with what Sarah said. I'm happy with someone who actually has an idea and a solution to bring to the table, because yes, I do feel like we're just in this loop of just everybody screaming at each other and not actually just sitting down and talking about it. Cause I mean, honestly, I feel like a lot of like those big issues that separate the parties, like, you know, gun control or abortion, like those made like, I feel like if we could get both sides to talk, there would be middle ground that is found way easier than people think. And there could be solutions. It's just nobody really wants to step up and take care of those solutions. So seeing that there is actually people out there to do that. And that's why I love you, Leslie.
But here's, you know, how do you apply that in real life? Right? The only way for that ever to happen is for the center or the middle or the independents to start donating, to start participating and starting to run, because that's the people that you're listening to. If you look at any kind of organization, political organization, John, maybe, I don't know if you've experienced this up by you, but the people that donate, the people that show up are the ones that are issue-based, right? So the regular people, the non-political people that everyone says you want to get their opinion, they don't go out and vote. They don't donate. They don't go to meetings. They don't have their voice heard. But yet they're the first person to argue, why can't everyone just sit down at a table and listen? Well, where are you at? Right? Why aren't you participating on whatever side you are? Why aren't you being that voice?
I can speak for Sarah. She's having to raise your 6 kids, so that's why she can't make it to those meetings. John, I know Aaron passed it to you. What were your thoughts on that?
I guess this has been a really enlightening conversation, and I hope the policymakers who watch this will really pay attention, Collin, to the survey data that you have gathered and that you've talked about during this conversation and this whole idea about threat to democracy. It seems like the common denominator to all of the problems we've talked about today is that everybody's getting into everybody else's business, either by telling people what to do with their transgender kids or, you know, passing rules and regulations that tell people how they should live their lives. Maybe the solution is that we should all treat everybody with courtesy and respect and shouldn't be telling each other what to do. And for Republican policymakers, this is a home run issue because Republicans are the party of freedom. And so if we could take the information that you've shared with us here today, Collin, and maybe use it and turn it around and say, hey, look, threats to democracy, it's not the Republicans. We're the ones who are in favor of democracy, and talk to voters that way. We could turn this information around and make our cities, our communities a better place to live. And it all starts with treating each other with courtesy and respect and not getting into everybody else's business.
Yeah, totally. And I think when Republicans become that party of individual responsibility and freedom again, we're going to see, you know, a lot of success in these issues. I always talk about, Abby will tell you, I kind of rant about this, about how, you know, Democrats hate Trump, but the left created Trump by constantly talking down to middle America and regular Americans by saying you're wrong and you don't deserve to have your own opinions, by making decisions for them and speaking down to them. Those people then said, screw you, middle finger to you. Fine, I'll vote for someone as ridiculous as Donald Trump because I want to just burn the whole thing down. And then I said it, after Biden one, I said, if the Democrats don't learn from this, Trump's going to come back and he's going to win, which is the current track we're on, by the way, because if they don't learn from their lesson from this, then the voters are once again going to say, fine, screw you again. We'll vote for him again. I mean, if you don't want that, then you have to stop talking down at Americans and actually give them a chance to live their lives, to make decisions for their families. And the more that every time they turn on the TV or there's a late night show or they go on social media and they're being told by the media or by Hollywood or by whatever group you want to choose that you're wrong and you're horrible for even having an opinion on something, the more they're going to revolt and go for someone like a Trump instead of maybe somebody more reasonable like a Leslie Munger. They're pushing people more towards the far right, just like sometimes we push people more towards the far left. And we're both to blame for this. But the problem is, if you don't want people like Trump in office, then maybe you should return to civility and actually respect each other's opinions. Because the more you don't, the more we're going to give people like the Donald Trumps of the world all the air to take over both parties.
You know, I completely agree with a lot of what you just said, Collin. And I just like to say, I think the people who were the huge supporters of Trump early on, that group that didn't feel heard, it's because they saw their government not listening to them over and over again and saying, you know, I don't, you know, and the subtext is, I don't care that you have to drive 250 miles like all the time. We're going to shove an electric car down your throat. Or, you know, I don't care that you want this. You can't use your gas appliances or whatever those things are. And people just said enough. And here comes Donald Trump with a point of view that's ridiculous. You ought to be able to have whatever you want. And so I think that is that forcing of it. And I think what I'm hoping that our party, especially particularly in Illinois, will come forward as is that those of us who call ourselves Republicans will be the party that actually is your voice in government, that we're going to listen to what you want and what your needs are. And we are going to work as hard as we can to make those things happen. And that we're serving you and we're not serving someone else. And we're not shoving anything down your throat. It's what you want. And we're going to lift up those things. And
well, Aaron, let me call out both you and me in this and say, you know, when you say, hey, listen, you can't have X or can't do X, we're going to do it because we're jackasses.
Yeah.
So like, but they say you can't have your Hummer or I can't have my Challenger. I'm gonna be like, screw you, I'm gonna drive it every chance I get. I love that car. But when you say, hey, listen, when I see the damage that's being done to the country when it comes to not taking care of our water, our environment, like when I see those things and you don't force it on me, I'm gonna make more environmentally conscious decisions. And Abby will be the first to say, like, yeah, I still drive my Challenger because it's my baby, and I may love it more than I even love my own wife. But you know, if you try to take it away, I'm just going to drive it more. But if you give me the opportunity to make decisions and more environmentally conscious decisions, I'm going to do that. And I look at things I do today that a decade ago I would have never done, but now I do it because it's like, hey, this is a more respectful of the environment, and I want to pass on a better environment to my kids than I got from my parents. Like the world is, especially America, we are becoming more and more environmentally conscious. But when you force it, like Leslie said, then we get an overcorrection, and voters go put in someone like Donald Trump in office. So it almost hurts the cause more than it helps it.
Well, no, I agree with you, but I also think, you know, Collin, when you first started out, like many Americans, you didn't have the ability to be able to afford some of the things that are more expensive. When you have an electric car that's $50,000, $60,000, it's not widely accessible to the average American, right? You started out as a young person, you developed your business, you grew it in Illinois, not because of Illinois, but in spite of Illinois, right? And all the oppressive taxes. And so now you have the opportunity, because you've been able to prosper, to make better decisions. I think instead of telling people what they should be able to do, we should try to create an environment where people have those personal freedoms, where they have the ability to make a really good wage, so then they can have those options, be able to afford the more expensive electric car and do more for the economy. But when you're trying to push on people that can't afford this car, and you're going to say that we're going to make America carbon neutral in 2050, when we only have 13% of the emissions, but we're not holding China or one of the other countries accountable, right? But we're going to oppress our own people that can't afford their lifestyle that it is, and that's trying to make a few bucks. That's never going to resonate. That's why you see a lot of the Democratic base going over to the Trump, because they felt like the Democratic Party has left them. When you're talking about rural America, like Leslie was talking about, how are you going to drive 250 miles between counties on a daily basis, and when you have to charge every 5 minutes, or you got a 6,000-pound car because the battery weighs so much? These are the things that the elite in Washington are talking about and trying to push onto us, but they're not looking at how it actually affects the common person, right? J.B. Pritzker never knows what it's like to work 40 hours a week on a manual job, because that wasn't the life that he has, so he shouldn't be talking about it. Joe Biden doesn't understand that, because he's been a political employee for over 50 years in Washington, right? When you look at local government, when you look at things that we're trying to do to help people in Palatine, help people in Vernon Township, those are the people that we should be listening to. And I think we've gotten so far away from that experience in that local government, and you have people telling you how to live. It upsets people, and that's when they go to their pitchforks and torches. That's when the violence comes out, because you're like, you're oppressing me, and you're not letting me do what I need to do, and you don't understand what it's like to have no gas money, and $3.65 a gallon is, I got to choose between getting to work and giving my family a better opportunity to eat, right? We would love to buy organic food, but we can't afford it, man.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
That's the real threat to democracy, I think. We Republicans need to take that information and turn it around in the right way. And that way voters will support Republican policies.
Yeah. Well, all right, I'm going to skip over one more topic, go to our last one, because we definitely are way over now. But last topic, just to open it up, especially because Abby said that we're going to disagree on it. So I'm kind of excited. I don't like talking national politics on this show because we're Illinois focused, but we've brought up Biden, we've brought up Trump. Let's talk about this, because that's going to be the big fight. Obviously, Biden-Trump for the White House. It seems like Trump's going to be the nominee on the Republican side. If Biden makes it to November, and I'm joking, but if he makes it to November, he'll be the nominee on the Democratic side. And there was a big topic this last week because the DOJ's special report came out and really made Biden look very, very bad with not having a good memory. And they used the tagline that he's a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, which if Lane has the ability to bring up in post, someone then created a Biden yard sign with that as his tagline, where it's like, Joe Biden for president, a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Anyway, so just want to open it up. I know people like talking national politics. So we got probably Biden, Trump for the White House in November. Anyone want to share some thoughts on that as we close down, or people just don't even want to touch it? What do you got?
I can tell you, we're going to have a house divided over here for sure.
Well, I can tell you that I think that is just a heartbreaking state for our country. That's
the best we can do.
That's what we're dealing with. It is like shocking to me. That's what we got.
Right.
Well, we always hear a lot how people want term limits. And it was a poll we just took recently where for the first time ever, instead of people saying term limits, they were saying age limits, which has never been a big political talking point. Usually if you're younger,
we have 35, you have to be 35 years old to be president. You should be 35 or older to be president. You should be 75 or younger to be president as well. Why can't you put caps on either side?
But this is my point is that usually when we ask people, like, what reforms do you want to see? They always say term limits. We never hear age limits. And now for the first time, people are saying we need age limits for politicians.
Because Biden's going to be 150 years old if he gets to the next term. I mean, this is not even
so is Trump, though.
This is elder abuse, no matter how you look at it, right? I mean, he can't even get off the stage.
Trump's only 4 years younger. I mean, it's an issue, but I mean, I would also argue that campaign spending works into this. And so we have a very small pool of people who really can run for president these days. And a lot of them are older. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I think this topic in particular has come up a couple times within the last year, because you obviously had like Mitch McConnell's whole thing last year that really like stirred the pot with this conversation. You had was it Dianne Feinstein, who it's passed away, but she was, I mean, was she in her ninth, like in her
and not even showing up for the job because she couldn't.
Mean, it's come up so much recently that like, yeah, I've been focused more on it, because I'm like, how are people still voting for these people to be in office when they clearly are not all with it? And that's not meant to be offensive. That's just what happens with age. So like, why are we not being like, no, but should there be an age cap on running for like a federal office or any office?
Or even just you see on the Supreme Court keeping people alive for as long as possible because you don't want the other people to be able to name someone to that seat. So you got people like that are there who are clearly just being like propped up with sticks so that they survive till the next administration. Like, so it's a decent point. I saw you, Leslie. Looks like you wanted to jump in too.
I was just going to say that I think people age at different rates, and I agree that, when you get to be like in your 90s, and you can't even show up at a meeting, you clearly can't do the job anymore. It's time to, exit stage left and get out. But, You know, I think there's a huge difference between, and this is not necessarily an endorsement for the two people that we have, but there's very much of a difference between the two candidates we have and their ability to do anything right now. We're seeing it every single day. You know, when we see our current president not be able to remember things, and I don't know if it shows up on the feeds that you see, Sarah, but you know, there are clips everywhere of memory failures and things with the president, and there were when he ran, and yet people voted for him anyway. And so again, I think some of this goes back to getting a media that actually gives all the facts of everything. It's been so one-sided, and I personally think that the one-sidedness and the stream of information that frankly was wrong, talk about misinformation coming out about Russian collusion and all those other things, is part of the reason why we have Trump, because there are a whole host of people that voted for him before and watched what happened to him that now feel like he deserves another chance. And it's the far right group it's that group of people that's pushing him. And if actually we had truthful information, people would see the pros and the cons of all of our candidates, and they would pick somebody as more reasonable. But
well, and Leslie, to your point, we've got the polling that says that the Democrats coming after Trump and having all these lawsuits going after Trump have actually significantly increased his support. It's part of the reason why he is going to be the Republican nominee, most likely, was pushing this. Now, many people believe, including me, that's intentional. The Democrats know that they have a better chance at beating Trump than anybody else. So they intentionally wanted him to be the nominee. But to your point, constantly going after the guy made his supporters dig in and say, fine, screw you. You want to go after my guy? And I'm going to support him again. So we're creating our own horrible future that none of us want. And we're the ones who are creating it in many cases. So it's frustrating for sure.
I hate to be obviously I'm a Republican, but I feel like the tactics that the Democrats have used over and over, from all the lies, everything, it's just creating all of this. And we're seeing, I mean, how we could have a president today who is showing every day weakness in so many different areas. And yet he's the candidate. I would hope that if we had a presidential candidate who couldn't remember his lines, who was clearly like failing in a lot of dementia related areas, that we would find somebody else to put up.
Well, and Leslie, here's the thing. Democrats are right. I've had a few Democrat friends who say every time Joe Biden screws something up, y'all got to make a huge big deal of it. And they're not wrong. That, listen, he's also human, so he's going to make some mistakes, and I respect that. Here's the challenge, though. Every time George W. Bush said something remotely stupid, it was on the evening news everywhere to make Republicans and Bush look dumb. Every time Trump says something stupid, which is pretty often, it's everywhere to make Republicans look dumb. So why then wouldn't Republicans do the same thing to Democrats and Biden? Doesn't make it right. It just means that there's a lot of Republicans and conservatives who have said, you know what, you're going to keep doing this crap to me, fine, I'm going to do it to you. Doesn't make it right. It just means it's kind of this spiral where we're all taking the worst possible tactics against each other, because fine, you did it to me and I'm going to do it to you. Someone needs to stand up and say, you know what, it's not right, so I'm just not going to do it. I mean, someone's got to be a leader in the room. I don't know who's going to do it. Maybe one day someone will do it. So it's not defending it, but I am saying that when I hear from left-leaning people like, man, y'all are too mean to Joe Biden, I'm like, dude, you know how mean you were to Bush, you know how mean you are to Trump, don't even complain about it.
Well, and remember, I wanted to allow pedophiles in schools when I was running for office.
This
That
is
was
true.
my Democrat. So it goes way back.
Yeah, this is
No,
true.
Collin, Sarah's got one that she's been holding over here that I think she wanted to say.
What?
Go. You're not going to get me upset or mad.
I don't know what you want me to say.
Tell me what you were going to say.
What was I gonna say?
Oh. I think Sarah's got some pretty strong feelings on Trump and on Biden election coming up.
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm just disappointed that in both cases. I mean, you make jokes like, "Oh, Biden might be dead by then." I'm like, "Well, Trump might be in jail by then." I mean, it's just ridiculous that these are the people. It is incredibly frustrating to me. And I will say that I used to think when George Bush made up his little words, I thought it was adorable. It was very,
Well, I
but I
will
do
say
not
that-
feel that way about Trump. I do not.
I will say, when we had the conversation about violence before, Republicans were a little more willing to turn to violence, but when it came to Trump, Democrats were a lot more willing. Some of the responses we got back of how do you fix the problems in this country, there were zero responses that said kill Biden or kill Democrats. We had a number of responses that were kill Trump, throw him out of the country, put him in jail, lock away the key. I don't even care if it's not legal. There were some nasty, nasty, horrible
Like
responses.
lock him up, like that kind of thing.
Right.
But it wasn't just lock them up. There were some that were like, one said, I don't care if you have the legal right to do so, just throw them in jail for forever. Like, it's just the level of that vitriol that we've reached, especially in the anti-Trump category. It's just gotten crazy.
Well, we don't have to go and try to kill. We don't have to try to kill Joe Biden, man. We just got to wait a little bit, right? He'll take care of himself.
Father Time is undefeated. So we had Valentine's Day. I'll close my thoughts with this. So one of the best Valentine's cards that I saw was a picture of Biden, and it said, "Hey, baby, are you a flight of stairs? Because I'm falling all over you."
I saw that.
No, I have the best Valentine's card that came out. Sarah took it because she's a graphic designer, and she put Donald Trump with a little bit of hearts. It says, "I wouldn't deport you, baby."
Oh, nice.
All right, we're way over our time. I want to thank you guys for not only doing this, but sticking with us for overtime. Leslie, John, any final thoughts from you guys as we close down the episode?
I just think love bridges all gaps and brings us all together. It's a beautiful thing.
John grew up on the Beatles. He's got this covered. Aaron, Sarah, final thoughts from you guys?
No, I'm just glad that you had us on the program. Thanks so much, Collin. And I'm glad that she's still talking to me. There's no separation that I thought might have been happening from this conversation.
We're not going to be recording in a minute. Let's see if that remains once the recording stops.
We'll
What about you, Abby?
No, I thought this was like a really, really cool discussion, and I could not have asked for two better couples to have on here. Truly, this was like my dream scenario. So thank you both so much for joining. Yeah.
Well, kudos to Abby for the great idea. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our watchers. Thank you to Lane Davis, our producer, who's going to have to go into overtime since this episode is way long. We will be back next week. And because we didn't get to get into a lot of our campaign topics, I'm just looking at the list. We are going to have dozens of campaign topics next week. So if you care about primaries in Illinois, you definitely want to watch next week's episode. In the meantime, happy Valentine's Day. Share the love. I love my wife and the mother of my soon-to-be child. And thank you guys for being on here. We'll catch you next week.